Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by Casey Murphy. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, nice to see you, mate. I'm going to set the bar a little bit low for my hosting skills because this is the first episode of this year. So, no idea what it's going to be like, Casey. I might be rusty as hell and all over the place, mate. So, there you go.
First podcast ever for me.
Cool. But yeah, no, nice to see you, mate. Nice chatting. I know we were talking about my accident over the holidays, but did you have a nice break for the new year?
It's been about a couple of weeks with the wife's family and get the cousins together.
Yeah, good, mate. Yesterday was my first proper day back, and like just getting back on the laptop. The first 3 or 4 hours of the day, I was so slow. Like stuff that would normally take me like 15 minutes was taking me like 40 minutes. Like it takes a while to get match fit again, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, it's honestly wild. It's getting a little bit of a warm up in. And the best news for that is you figure out that everybody else is in the same boat. They're doing the exact same thing. In fact, we kicked off a meeting yesterday with exactly that. They were like, I don't really want to be here. And I know you guys don't want to be here, though, but took it slow, took it easy, and started digging out of the email inbox, which was way too full.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know how it goes.
Listen, it's Tuesday today, just another few days, and we'll all have that Friday feeling again, mate. So we'll be good. I'm just going to do you a bit of an intro, mate, for the listeners that don't know who you are. If I get any of this wrong, feel free to correct me, my friend. But started off life out in the US Navy, was there for around 7.5 years and transitioned out and went to Accenture. Then you did a MBA internship at Secure AI Labs, and then progressed on nicely. You held a head of partnerships position. Then you was at Microsoft for quite some time. And you've currently Phosphorus Cybersecurity. You started off life there as chief of staff, and you've now progressed up to director level and director of revenue marketing. So welcome to the show, mate.
All right. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I know I've done you a bit of an intro, but where I always like to kind of start is, who are you? What do you get up to? What's a day in the life of Casey like right now?
So who am I? That's a big one. I'd say first and foremost, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. So that's probably the number one thing that I would say defines my identity because I orient everything around that. And the reason that is such a big deal is every single step of my way, I would call my career the ultimate Forrest Gump career. Granted, would love to end up being a multimillionaire like he did at the end, but certainly not there yet. But it's basically been this series of what's the next right decision. There was no real big grand vision. When I went into the Navy, it was saying, hey, it's time to get a big boy job. Before that, I was a ski instructor right after college and was praying through, hey, what's next? And the Lord said, all right, you're going to the Navy. And all right, that's it, done. And the submarine thing was the one thing. I walked out of a meeting in college, actually, at one point, and it was a recruitment meeting for the nuclear program. And I said, thanks for the free pizza. Never going to do that. And I'm definitely never doing submarines. And end up exactly there. Looking back, it was exactly where I needed to be. It's where I should have been. And everything that came out of that was absolutely incredible. And while the transition was really rough out of the Navy, those transferable skills, like they're not going to kick in yet, but once I actually get back into a proper leadership position or I'm running my own shop or doing my own startup, that's where that stuff's going to kick in. And I realized that I didn't have to have the grand plan in mind. I just needed to make the next right decision. And so if I was going to characterize everything, that's about where I would land. So the who I am, I'm a Christian. And right now, a day in the life is stepping out, providing for the family and showing up for revenue marketing, learning this new position and learning it at a startup, which you can imagine is already, the learning curve is steep. And that's not just at my level, that's at the organizational level too.
Yeah, cool, mate. Now, there's loads there, Casey. I really like as well, you basically acknowledge the fact that you've been learning the nuclear program and the Navy. You were learning skills then that are going to benefit you later on in life. And I've heard different podcasts of people that are at the very end of their career, maybe 70 years old plus, and they talk about how they didn't realize at the time that different things were happening and perhaps they didn't even appreciate or want certain things to happen at the time. But then when they look back and connect the dots of the whole life, they realize everything happened for a reason. And they were learning these things to benefit them later on in life. So it's nice that you've seen that at a fairly early stage, which is quite nice.
Yeah. And to add to that, you actually just raised a really good point. It was interesting because when I was doing the MBA program, I was really surrounded by a lot of folks who had this distinct impression that they were in complete control. And I understood why they said that. They've succeeded at almost everything they've ever done. They were coming in out of investment banking. They were coming in out of venture capital. They were coming in out of consulting and these careers where everything they touch turned to gold. And what's so interesting is if you think that you're in control or you think that you earned all of that, there was no grace in there. There was nothing to guide your way beyond your own efforts, your own intelligence, your own capabilities. When you fail, it falls completely on you. And you can't see that failure in light of the lesson that you're supposed to learn from that. And it's very difficult to see that outside of attaching your identity to that success or failure. And for me, having that sort of ripped away from me, and instead being able to look at that entire journey, successes, failures, all that good stuff in light of how that's going to pay off down the road and what God's doing in my life at that time to either humble me or work on an attitude problem, or you name it, whatever that is. It completely freed me up to experience success and failure and put it in proper perspective.
Yeah, I think that resilience piece is, if that muscle never gets flexed, so you get older and older, it's probably harder and harder to flex as well. I think if it gets a few knocks early on and you come back and then knocked again and you come back, I think that resilience muscle becomes pretty strong by the time you get to, midlife, if you like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've seen folks where, this is a tough one, but like there are some folks where, like I said, everything they did turned to gold. They ended up getting married. They ended up early on being a CEO of some major corporation or a major startup or you name it. They experienced that success early. I'll back up a little bit. We did these vignettes when I was at HBS, and they were looking at people who were like 20, 30 years down the road. And I remember at least two of them were saying, I had a wildly successful career. I was CEO. I made a ton of money. I'm pretty happy, but then they would start to go into their family life and they're like, but I'm divorced. My kids don't talk to me. That sounds, quite frankly, terrible. That sounds like everything that you wanted as your foundation, you ended up replacing with this thing that could change. Money comes and goes, success comes and goes, career comes and goes. But the hope there is that your family is always there because you stewarded it properly. And to have this early and to prioritize early the things that really matter, I thought, learning that message early on and getting to see the failures of others to apply to my own life. Now I'm nothing but grateful. Coming out of business school, by the way, I wanted to be off to the races. And now I'm extremely grateful that after 4 or 5 years, I got to go through sort of the school of hard knocks and put that in proper place so that I was prioritizing my wife. I was prioritizing being a dad to my kiddo, like all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I think we're much better at talking about all this kind of stuff these days. Like probably the culture, you mentioned kind of investment bank. I'm thinking of like the culture of an investment banking firm maybe 20, 30 years ago. Like you wouldn't have been able to talk openly like we are now. I'm thinking of the culture of recruitment agencies like 20 years ago. If you'd have said that you want a bit of balance, remote working, talk about mental health, it just wasn't a thing back then. But I think we've got way better at acknowledging these things and realizing that they are all like mega important.
100%. And you look back at a generation before, I was basically raised on, if you work hard, do the right thing, then you'll succeed. And it actually turns out that's not necessarily true. The other piece of that is, and this is a hard lesson I learned in the Navy, there was a particular underway where I basically crushed 18-hour days, 30 days straight, and I burned myself out. I hit the wall at the end of that and turned into a non-functioning human being. And I realized that hard work, like there has to be strong boundaries around that. I have to give myself white space to think. I've got to give my brain a break if I'm going to be a functioning human being. And I've heard about the folks who they were one of the big 3 consulting corporations or consulting companies, or they were in investment banking, and they're getting 3 hours of sleep and they're just crushing it. And I would say that there is the space for that, I think, in your 20s, right? But if that's your life, man, like how much capacity are you losing on the back end and how much creativity are you not allowing yourself by not giving your brain time to recover? So what I would say is when I put those boundaries in place, I'll give myself 9, 10, sometimes 11 hours during the day where I am busting my tail. I'm in execute mode. I am doing the work. But if there's not a hard stop on the front end or on the back end of that to where I'm getting time to either journal and read my Bible, or on the back end, getting time to take my wife on a date, spend time with the family and do dinner with the family, things like that, I'd say I'm doing my company and myself a disservice because that's not sustainable and they're not getting the best out of it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's so nice to hear you talk, Casey, like that, because it's like some of this stuff, I need to hear someone like you say that, and then someone needs to probably reinforce it again in 3 or 4 months' time because I'll forget and I'm pushing too hard and stuff like that. But yeah, I think with remote working as well, you use the word boundaries, but you do need them because I'm probably giving you way too much information here, but I'll give you it. Just a little thing. I've got an old iPhone, which I now take to bed, and I leave this one, which is my work one, which has got Slacks, which my clients have got me in, and 3 or 4 different inboxes, LinkedIn's on it, you name it. I leave that away from the bed now, and I take my old phone to bed so I can check the time. I've got an alarm on it, blah, blah, blah. And the difference in my sleep is like phenomenal. Whereas if I take that work phone anywhere near that bed, like it's getting checked in the middle of the night, and it's not good. And I think when you're remote, and since the advent of even cloud technology and everything like that, like I think you've probably got to be a bit more like in the old days, like when you left the office, you left the office. Like everything was in the office. Like you couldn't work outside the office. Whereas now you can work anywhere. So you've got to be a bit more intentional, haven't you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that for me has been, it's something where I really had to learn how to do it too. Going way back, I kicked off the first 18 years of my life as an athlete, first 20 years really. And in that sense, it's a little bit more like the office feel where if you've got a boss who is there, there's that sort of external pressure, that external accountability to get the job done every day. And you feel like you need to grind it out or at least look busy in that entire time period. Whereas being in remote work, like you actually have the option to not be working all day or to do things you need to take care of. And there's now much more laissez-faire attitude about when you're doing the work and a more stringent attitude on what results are you producing, which to be honest, I kind of like that approach more. But what I had to do was figure out the self-discipline to figure out how to make that work because it's so easy to get distracted. And what you were saying about Slack, I even realized in this role that if I'm constantly checking my Slack and checking my messages, I never give myself that hour or two to actually do the deep dive, heads down work on things like my current job, putting together the tech stack and doing the real analysis on which deals we won and lost, getting into that nitty gritty stuff where I give myself permission to ignore everything for 2 to 3 hours and just workshop what I need to get done in that sort of deep thinking period. It's a conscious choice and it's so easy to lose sight of until you realize you've just gotten nothing done because you switched between email and Slack 14 times in the time you were supposed to be doing that deep dive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. We did this, me and my team, we paid to do this course. It was a while ago now, and it was basically how to structure like a remote recruitment agency. And there was a few different things in there. But one of the things that they mentioned again and again, and they called it fire mode. And it was basically what you're describing there. It was like your most important jobs of the day, your high value tasks, the things that you just have to do that day. Get up. If you like coffee, have a coffee. And just go into fire mode for 2 or 3 hours. And they gave you all these stats about how if you do that and you like really do a deep dive for a few hours, it was basically saying you'll actually get more work done in that first few hours than what most people do in a full day. And ever since I got taught that, I've stuck to it as well. And it just gives you a really uplifting feeling as well, doesn't it? Because when you've got that feeling of progressing and moving forward, like I think that's what makes us all feel good. And that's what that does. It's nice.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's the best thing in the world. And, you know, one of the areas I learned that, so when I was working in the Pentagon, so I did my Navy submarine tour for 3 years, did my short tour in the Pentagon and did work on the OPNAV staff. So I was doing nuclear weapons policy, arms control treaties, all that good stuff. In that time, I actually got slotted in to be the Admiral's aide for a little while, just subbing in. And getting to observe how he did that work was absolutely eye-opening because what he would do, he'd get to work at 6 a.m., which means I did too, speaking of work-life balance. But he basically said, if I don't get all of my deep dive work done before 7:30 when everybody shows up, once those meetings start, my day is done. Because I have an hour and a half window. And if I don't get that done between 6 and 7:30, then I have no prep for the meetings. I have no way to make good decisions because I haven't actually thought about them. I'm trying to make these off-the-cuff decisions without any preparation whatsoever. And so all the work he was doing was going through the documents, doing the deep reading, taking the time to slow his brain down and actually think about the implications of the decision, the context, all that good stuff. And if he hadn't given himself permission to do that from 6 to 7:30 in that vital hour and a half, 2 hours, then all the decisions he's making, and he's making big decisions, as you might imagine, who knows where they land? You know, who knows if he's going to make the right one, the wrong one? Who knows if he understands the second and third order effects of those decisions? It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like the thing is as well, it's so much happens in the day. You know what it's like. You're involved with bringing revenue in. Like it can get emotional sometimes. Sometimes stuff that should land doesn't land. The days never go to plan. If you make a day plan, especially if you've got a team of people around, like stuff just happens. And the beauty of that, like the Admiral was doing there, or that deep work in the morning, or fire mode, whatever you want to call it, the beauty of that is you and him were getting in at 6 a.m. I'm imagining there weren't too many people about, so there's not too much to go wrong at that stage, and you can actually get stuff done.
You're not getting interrupted. And I've had those days where I've got my to-do list and it's sitting there staring me in the face, and I'm just cycling through, chipping away 5 minutes at a time at each task. It's such a waste. Being able to knock out a couple of the little things, it's a good thing. And I'm still figuring out how to structure it, honestly. I've talked to folks who they're hyper-organized, they're good at that stuff, but I've still not really met anybody who has said, yeah, I know exactly how to tackle my to-do list every single day. It's just, I think it's the reality. I know one of my mentors, he was a CFO at a publicly traded company, and one of the busiest guys I've ever seen, but also one of the best managers of his time that I've ever seen. And he carried around a 3x5 index card. He had the 3 people he needed to talk to that day and the 3 tasks he needed to get done that day. And in my mind, I'm like, you're CFO at a publicly traded company. That is an insanely low amount of stuff that you expect to get done. And he was like, this is realistic. This is what I can do in these chunks to get the ball moving forward just a little bit every single day. Because at the end of the 5 days, and that same to-do list is still sitting there because I didn't decide to actually chip them off properly, then I've done myself and everybody else a disservice. I just haven't done the right work, and I haven't been able to prioritize my time accordingly.
Yes. Did you say he had the cue card, almost like a notepad in his hand?
He had one 3x5 index card that he carried around in his pocket for that day. And at the beginning of the day, he had 2 columns. He had the 3 people he wanted to talk to and the 3 things he wanted to get done.
Yeah, I love that. Because another thing is, I know we mentioned Slack. I know just before we hit record, you said you were going through your inbox and stuff on my first day back. And I did the same thing. And there was a few things in there that needed my attention. But on the whole, most of it was absolute rubbish. People trying to sell me stuff. Most of it was just AI written emails, and you can see them a mile off these days. And I was thinking, I'm constantly checking inboxes all the time. And I need to stop doing that, because I've heard that to be the most efficient, it's you're just meant to allocate maybe a few times a day to check the inboxes. And it sounds like that CFO you're talking about, if he's rocking around the office with cue cards, he's probably not checking his devices too often either. He's just focusing on those tasks on his cards.
Yeah, and that's what's hilarious. It's literally a handwritten cue card, which I love to do because it's analog, right? You're not on the computer distracted by the to-do list. You've got it sitting right there. And what the other cool thing, and I've got best boss ever, right? And his words, he's the one who actually prompted me to do this. And he said, especially because he knows that I'm still learning this world. I've been in the working world for 20 years now, but coming out of the Navy into the corporate world, that code switching is extremely difficult. And there's a huge difference, of course, and anybody who's been through school knows this, huge difference between getting the MBA and then putting those principles into practice. And he knows that he brought me on in this revenue marketing role with a steep learning curve, knew that I had the foundation, but also knew that I've still got a ton to do in terms of that experiential learning. And he's the one who said that I need to give myself permission to get those 2 or 3 hours in, whatever, per week or a couple of days a week or whatever it is. And I've been doing things like coursework, right? HubSpot Academy is a perfect example. There's tons of good materials there. I'm getting a second master's right now at Georgia Tech because I realized that if I want to be a proper player in cybersecurity, I've got to do the technical deep dive. And so I'm not a programmer, but here I am trying to figure out how to do Python and read assembly language, things like that. Stuff that I'd never done before, but it's been so worthwhile. And having somebody who provides that top cover and who gives me permission to go learn, man, what a blessing. I cannot say enough about how much he's allowed me to improve, and also just his instruction and wisdom, knowing that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. That's good, mate. That's a recipe as well for you staying around for a long time, because I've seen it before where companies and bosses are like that, and it's great your learning curve. It buys a lot of loyalty, and it tends to really help with retention and holding the team together. So I think it can be helpful for everyone. It's really nice.
Yeah, 100%.
There's some good learning material out there these days, isn't there? There's so much. It's knowing where to go sometimes.
Honestly, that's the downside. I'll be honest. ChatGPT and Grok have been my friends. I've been effectively using them as personal tutors. And of course, all that information has to be validated. But at the end of the day, if I need quick answers where it's more Socratic method and not sitting through a 20-minute YouTube, that's usually where I'll go. I've been able to put AI to work to my advantage in a lot of ways, which have been just huge for my own learning style. I've always, if I could just be somebody's Robin, right? Like to their Batman, getting to just train under the best and getting to get those quick answers and that rapid iteration, that also is, it keeps me from having to bug my boss and be like, hey, what about this? Our one-on-ones in, but he's got a day job too. And he's got a ton of work on his plate because startup life. Yeah. And so getting to leverage AI for that purpose has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard say that. You use the phrase they're putting AI to work. I saw a post yesterday from a chap he's pretty well known in the security space. His name's Daniel, and he was basically saying since AI, he's been able to watch different types of code being built in front of him and different type of stuff in relation to malware analysis. And he just said it's taken his understanding of coding in particular to a different level, because it's almost like you just said there, you look like Batman and Robin, you've almost got someone with you and you can literally watch it happening in front of your eyes. And it's like, yeah, that's really beneficial.
Yeah, it's honestly wild, because it took my ability to learn and it made it so much faster, because now I can ask the questions that I deem important and I'm not waiting on the person in the YouTube video to get there. A lot of times it's kind of when you look up a recipe and the first 3/4 of that recipe page is explaining the history of the recipe. And you're just like, oh my gosh, can I just get to the meat of this thing? And not knowing where that is it's so frustrating sometimes. But being able to use AI and then actually focus my attention on the really good teachers, right? Or the teachers who are doing so in a format that's more conducive to the way that I learn. That's fantastic, because then I'm not skipping through all this stuff. And there's something to be said for the analog doing the hard work. I think the AI learning will detract from your ability to learn if you don't put yourself through the paces and force yourself to figure it out and go through that painful experience of, for example, like learning to code. You mentioned that. If I don't go through the painful experience and if I just allow Cursor or VS Code to fill in the gap for me every single time and all I have to do is hit tab, I've learned nothing. All I've learned to do is let it do the thing for me. And there's absolutely something to be said, again, for those deep dives. But when it comes to stuff where it's in revenue marketing and I need to figure out the best way to track metrics and what the best practices are and what other people have done, I do not want to waste my time on 14 blogs and 20 YouTube videos when I've got Grok and I've got ChatGPT right there.
Do you know what, Casey? You're so right. Before you said that, I was thinking the same thing a few minutes ago. You've got to know when to really put AI to work, and you've almost got to know when not to. And it's like when you're talking about that CFO using Parent and being like ultra analog, and it's the same with what you're saying there. It's like there's certain cases, and I think so many people, myself included at one point, like we all just got so wrapped up in that hype of AI and started overusing it. Probably, I know from a recruitment standpoint, there is just certain times when it should just definitely not be used, and it's actually massively counterproductive, and it just actually frustrates and annoys people really quickly, and it can harm some relationships. So it's like you said, it's knowing when to use it properly. And if it's to do with learning, I think actually physically doing stuff and, like you say, doing those hard yards, there's some science behind it, but there's something about when you actually physically do it, it etches itself in your brain way better than it would otherwise, or if at all. Yeah, it's just sitting back and just being a little bit cute with it and thinking it through, because yeah, you can go way too much one way if you're not careful, can't you?
Oh, 100%. And I can tell you that, again, coming out of the Navy and the way we did things there, my boss, he wanted the printed page and he wanted to be able to mark it up with a blue pen. And to your point, I have no idea what the science is, but there are two things where, one of my instructors from my MBA program talked about this idea of deep reading. And she required me to print out the page and bring a pen in hand, because there was something about reading something that wasn't on a screen and something doing the physical handwriting that etched its way into my brain, where I was actually able to pull so much more context from that and retain the information so much better. There's a big reason why in the days of Kindle, I still have this massive library of physical books, because for me, like, that's absolutely key, getting my eyes off of a screen, getting my eyes onto a physical page and doing physical handwriting. Right? Like, I do a ton of journaling because that allows me to get all that context on the page and get that out of my head. if all that stuff is rattling around up there, it is useless. And if I'm trying to type, again, there's some bizarre, whatever the science is behind it, I'm sure somebody's done the research, but the difference between typing and writing, it makes a massive difference, not only of getting those thoughts out of my head so that I can actually organize them, look at them on a page, but it allows me to move one step beyond that. A lot of the work I was doing in the Pentagon was strategy work. And that takes out of the box thinking. That means putting the bad ideas on paper because they're going to inform where we need to go in the best possible way. And you might have heard it before, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, from Mike Tyson quote.
Yeah.
We use that a lot when we were doing Navy strategy because we realized the whole point of doing the strategy was not to actually get to the perfect strategy. It's so that when that strategy fell apart, all the preparation we did would inform how we need to adjust to move forward. Doing this work, doing that pen and paper work, doing that deep reading, that allowed us to get the neurons firing in the proper way so that we knew where to go from there. Because if we just used AI, or if we just did this shallow reading, these sort of shallow dives, as soon as that strategy falls apart, we have no idea what to do because we have to process the information ourselves. It hasn't worked its way into my brain, hasn't worked its way into my psyche and where I need to go from there. And to me, that's hugely problematic because you're not learning the right lessons there and you're dead in the water as soon as your strategy falls apart if it's all generated by somebody other than you.
Yeah, so true. The writing stuff down, the journaling or the writing stuff down, it's almost like a form of meditation. Like it just declutters the mind. It's so good. I think Richard Branson used to walk around, maybe still does, with a pad in his pocket at all times, just constantly writing stuff down. Because I'm a bit like that in the morning sometimes. My brain is like firing off and going back to like fire mode or deep work mode in the morning. Sometimes my mind is constantly, and I have to literally write it down, quickly go back, and then it will calm my mind back down. Whereas if I don't do that, I'm like, I almost lose focus.
Yeah, like Dumbledore's pensieve. I'm serious. He's pulling those thoughts out, he's putting them down, and he's laying that thing aside so that if he needs to come back to it, he can do that. But at the end of the day, like, it's a great thing for him, and it's a great way for me to, to get that information organized, put it in proper context and say, I can either deal with that now, it's a priority, or I can put it away later, but it's not rattling around up there, distracting me from the thing I need to get done right now.
Yeah, cool, mate. Mate, we came in this virtual studio almost 45 minutes ago, and I literally can't believe it because it feels like we've been chatting for about 10 minutes. I think we'll do another one. I've only ever done about a handful of part twos, but we should do another one because there is loads more we could chat about. But it's been really nice, mate. It's been a really just flowing conversation, and you've taught me a few things, and you've also reinforced a few things that I need to be doing myself. So if it's done that for me, it will definitely do that for the listeners as well, mate. But no, it's been nice to see you, mate. It's been enjoyable.
Absolutely. No, it's always a pleasure. Every time we catch up, I just walk away filled, and it's a good way to start the day.
Good, mate. But thanks, mate. It's been good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, just let me know and we'll keep in touch. Just in general, what you need something, keep me posted. But yeah, it's always a pleasure, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, mate.